The mall hummed with the steady rhythm of a typical weekend afternoon. Families strolled past gleaming shop windows, teenagers congregated in food courts, and sales clerks stood ready to serve. At the heart of the commotion stood Dean Matthews, the mall manager, a man who carried himself with a self-appointed air of authority. Known for his strict adherence to rules and an occasional tendency to overreach, Dean was as much feared as he was respected by the mall staff. His sharp eyes scanned the bustling atrium, looking for anything that might disturb the carefully curated environment under his watch. It was during this routine patrol that Dean spotted him. A middle-aged man wearing a red baseball cap embroidered with the unmistakable white letters, MAGA. Dean's lip curled instinctively. Over the years, he had enforced a neutral attire policy within the mall, a rule he justified as essential for maintaining peace in the politically diverse community. To him, the hat wasn't just an accessory, it was a provocation. The man wearing the hat, oblivious to Dean's scrutiny, meandered through the corridors, stopping occasionally to admire storefront displays. He had a calm, unassuming demeanor that seemed at odds with the bold statement of his headwear. Dressed simply in jeans and a button-down shirt, he didn't stand out in the crowd, save for the bright red cap. Dean's jaw tightened. He made a beeline toward the man, weaving through the clusters of shoppers with practiced ease. A few of his colleagues noticed his purposeful stride and exchanged wary glances. They had seen this before. Dean had a way of turning minor issues into public spectacles, and today seemed no different. "Excuse me, sir," Dean began, his voice loud enough to draw the attention of nearby shoppers. The man turned to face him, his expression neutral. "We have a policy here about clothing that might incite conflict or disrupt the peace. I'm going to have to ask you to remove that hat." For a moment, there was silence. A few shoppers paused mid-step, sensing the tension in the air. The man tilted his head slightly, his eyes meeting Dean's with calm curiosity. "I'm sorry," he said politely. "I wasn't aware of such a policy. Could you show it to me?" Dean bristled. This was not the response he had anticipated. "I don't need to show it to you," he snapped. "It's standard mall policy, and I'm the manager here. Now, either take the hat off or leave." The man raised his eyebrows, his calm demeanor unshaken. "I don't believe I'm causing any disruption," he replied evenly. "I'm just here to shop, like everyone else." By now, a small crowd had gathered, their curiosity piqued by the escalating confrontation. Phones emerged from pockets, their cameras capturing the exchange. Dean's face reddened, whether from anger or the growing attention, it wasn't clear. "Sir," he said, his voice rising, "this is private property. If you don't comply, I will have to escort you out." The man's lips quirked upward in a faint smile. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a neatly folded document. "I think you might want to take a look at this before you make any decisions," he said, handing the paper to Dean. Dean snatched the paper with a huff and unfolded it. His eyes scanned the text, his expression shifting from annoyance to confusion, and finally to disbelief. "What is this?" he stammered. "That," the man said calmly, "is the deed to this mall. My name is Tom Carter, and as of last month, I'm the new owner." The crowd erupted in gasps and murmurs. Dean's face turned ashen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He stared at Tom, the man he had just publicly berated, now revealed to be his boss. The phones in the crowd captured every second of his humiliation, the scene poised to go viral in a matter of hours. Tom stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "I believe I have every right to wear this hat, just as anyone else has the right to express themselves. Don't you agree, Mr. Matthews?" Dean could only nod, his confidence shattered. The weight of his mistake hung heavy in the air, visible to everyone watching. Tom turned to the crowd, offering a polite nod before continuing on his way, leaving Dean to grapple with the consequences of his actions. The shoppers dispersed, their conversations buzzing with the day's extraordinary turn of events. For Dean, however, the day was far from over. Tom Carter was not the kind of man anyone would immediately associate with wealth or power. Born and raised in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of town, he had built his life around hard work, perseverance, and an unshakable belief in fairness. His early years were spent managing a struggling family hardware store after his father's sudden passing. Those years taught him humility, resilience, and the importance of understanding people, traits that would shape his journey in unexpected ways. As the hardware store grew under his management, Tom began to invest carefully in local properties. What started as a small venture, a single duplex in need of repair, quickly expanded into a portfolio of residential and commercial properties. His knack for seeing potential where others saw decay earned him a reputation as a shrewd, fair businessman who cared deeply about the communities he served. But Tom remained grounded, often visiting tenants personally to address their concerns or attending neighborhood meetings to hear the voices of the people his properties impacted. The mall acquisition had been a recent and unexpected addition to his portfolio. Originally built in the 1980s, the Ridgeway Mall was a cornerstone of the town, but in recent years, it had fallen on hard times. Several anchor stores had closed, leaving large sections of the mall empty and depressing foot traffic. When the opportunity arose to purchase the property, Tom saw more than just a business investment. He saw a chance to breathe life back into a struggling community hub. Despite the risks, he decided to take it on, finalizing the deal quietly to avoid drawing unnecessary attention. Tom's unassuming nature meant that few people outside his immediate circle knew of his latest acquisition. He preferred to keep a low profile, observing how operations were run before stepping in to make changes. That Saturday, his plan was simple: take a casual stroll through the mall, chat with tenants and customers, and get a sense of what the space needed to thrive again. He had dressed down intentionally, blending in with the crowd, and had chosen the red MAGA hat almost as an afterthought. For him, it was less about making a political statement and more about expressing his belief in individual rights and freedom of expression. Dean Matthews, on the other hand, was as high-strung as they came. A career in retail management had hardened him into a man who saw rules as absolutes, with little room for nuance or empathy. His tenure as mall manager had been marked by a string of incidents where his strict enforcement of policies had ruffled feathers among both staff and patrons. While some admired his dedication, many more saw him as overbearing, a man who valued control over connection. That Saturday had started like any other for Dean. He had made his rounds, ensuring shop owners adhered to their leases and that customers respected mall policies. When he spotted Tom in the MAGA hat, his reaction was immediate and visceral. To Dean, the hat symbolized potential conflict, a threat to the carefully maintained neutrality of the mall. Without a second thought, he approached, his internal narrative casting himself as the protector of order. The confrontation that followed played out like a scene from a movie. To those watching, it seemed like a classic case of authority overreach. To Tom, it was an unexpected test of his patience and principles. But for Dean, it was the beginning of a reckoning he hadn't seen coming. As Tom walked away after revealing his identity, Dean stood rooted to the spot, replaying the exchange in his mind. His cheeks burned with a mix of anger and embarrassment. How could he have been so blind? He prided himself on knowing the ins and outs of the mall, yet he hadn't even been informed of a change in ownership. Was this some kind of test? If it was, he had failed spectacularly. The news spread through the mall like wildfire. Store owners whispered behind counters, customers exchanged knowing glances, and employees speculated about what might happen next. Tom, meanwhile, continued his quiet tour of the mall, stopping to chat with shop owners and employees, offering kind words and a listening ear. His calm demeanor belied the storm brewing behind him. Later that day, Dean found himself summoned to the mall's administrative office, his stomach churning. He walked in to find Tom seated at the head of the conference table, his expression unreadable. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. "Mr. Matthews," Tom began, his voice steady, "do you know why I'm here today?" Dean hesitated, unsure of how to respond. I assume it has to do with our earlier interaction," he stammered, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. Tom nodded. "That's part of it," he said. "But I'm also here because I believe this mall has potential that hasn't been fully realized. And to be honest, today's incident has given me a lot to think about." Dean swallowed hard, his mind racing. Was this the end of his career? Would Tom fire him on the spot? He couldn't imagine a scenario where he came out of this unscathed. Tom leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "Dean, I believe in second chances. What happened today was unacceptable, but I also believe it was a symptom of a larger issue. This mall has been managed in a way that prioritizes rules over relationships, control over community. That needs to change." Dean blinked, taken aback. He had expected anger, perhaps even retribution, but Tom's words carried none of that. Instead, there was a quiet determination, a vision for something better. "I want you to think about how we can create a space where everyone feels welcome," Tom continued. "That includes respecting individual expression while maintaining a peaceful environment. If you're willing to take on that challenge, I'm willing to give you the opportunity to grow into a leader who fosters connection, not conflict." Dean felt a lump rise in his throat. He hadn't expected compassion, especially not after the way he had acted. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of something he hadn't associated with his job, hope. Tom rose from his seat, signaling the end of the meeting. "Take some time to reflect," he said. "We'll talk again next week." As Dean left the office, his mind buzzed with a mix of relief and resolve. He had been given a second chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. For Tom, the incident was a reminder of why he had taken on the mall in the first place. It wasn't just about business, it was about building something meaningful, a space where people could come together despite their differences. What had started as a routine visit had turned into a pivotal moment, setting the stage for a transformation that would ripple through the mall and beyond. Tom arrived at the mall early the next morning, the memory of the previous day still fresh in his mind. He had spent the night reflecting on the encounter with Dean Matthews and the ripple effects it might have. It wasn't just about the hat or the confrontation, it was about the culture of the mall, the way people interacted with one another, and how this space could either divide or unite the community. For Tom, this was a turning point, not just for the mall, but for everyone connected to it. As he walked through the quiet corridors before the stores opened, Tom observed the little details others might overlook: a scuff on the tile that hadn't been cleaned, a flickering light in the atrium, a tired employee setting up displays with a forced smile. Each detail told a story, and Tom was determined to learn as many of them as he could. He believed that the soul of any space came from the people within it, and he was here to listen. Dean, however, was not having a peaceful morning. The events of the previous day had left him rattled. His phone buzzed with messages, questions from employees, whispers among the staff, even a few sarcastic remarks from those who had long resented his strict management style. Worse, he had discovered that several videos of the confrontation had gone viral overnight, gathering thousands of views and igniting heated debates in the comment sections. Some sided with Dean, defending the idea of rules in public spaces, but many more criticized him, calling him a symbol of intolerance and misplaced authority. By the time Tom requested to see him, Dean was already a bundle of nerves. He dreaded the conversation, fearing it might be the end of his career, but he also knew he had to face the consequences of his actions. When he entered the small meeting room where Tom waited, he was surprised to find the atmosphere calm, even welcoming. Tom sat at the table, a cup of coffee in front of him, flipping through a small stack of papers. He looked up and greeted Dean with a warm smile. "Good morning, Dean," Tom said, gesturing for him to sit. "Thanks for coming." Dean sat down cautiously, unsure of what to expect. "Good morning," he replied, his voice subdued. Tom wasted no time. "Dean, I've spent a lot of time thinking about what happened yesterday. I won't lie to you, it wasn't a good look for the mall or for either of us. But what I'm interested in now is what we can learn from it and how we move forward." Dean nodded, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I understand, sir. I know I overreacted. I thought I was enforcing the rules, but I realize now that I didn't handle it the right way." Tom leaned forward slightly, his tone gentle but firm. "Dean, I'm not here to lecture you. What I want to know is why you felt so strongly about enforcing that policy. What was going through your mind?" The question caught Dean off guard. He had expected anger, perhaps even dismissal, but not genuine curiosity. He took a deep breath before answering. "Honestly, sir, I think it comes down to fear. This mall has had its share of problems, arguments, even a couple of fights, over people bringing their personal politics into a public space. I thought I was protecting the peace, but looking back, I realize I was too focused on avoiding conflict instead of addressing it the right way." Tom nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I understand where you're coming from, Dean. But here's the thing, avoiding conflict by silencing people doesn't create peace. It creates resentment, and that's not the kind of environment I want for this mall. What we need is a space where people feel safe to express themselves while also respecting others. That balance isn't easy, but it's worth striving for." Dean listened intently, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. For the first time, he felt like his concerns were being acknowledged instead of dismissed. "I see your point," he said. "And I'd like to help make that happen, if you'll give me the chance." Tom smiled, appreciating the sincerity in Dean's voice. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear. I believe everyone deserves a chance to grow, Dean. You've been with this mall for a long time, and I think you care about it as much as I do. Let's work together to create something better." The two men spent the next hour discussing ideas for improving the mall's culture. Tom suggested creating a task force of employees and tenants to address issues of inclusivity and respect, ensuring that everyone had a voice. Dean proposed hosting community events to bring people together and encourage positive interactions. By the end of the meeting, they had a rough plan in place and a renewed sense of purpose. As the day unfolded, Tom continued his tour of the mall, speaking with store owners and employees, many of whom had heard about the previous day's incident. His presence was a calming influence, and his willingness to listen earned him the respect and trust of those he spoke to. He learned about the challenges they faced: declining foot traffic, outdated facilities, and a sense of disconnection among the mall's occupants, and promised to address their concerns. Meanwhile, Dean began taking small steps to rebuild his reputation. He went out of his way to greet employees with a smile, offering assistance where he could and listening to their feedback without judgment. It wasn't easy, some were still wary of him, and others openly expressed their skepticism, but Dean was determined to prove he could change. By the end of the day, the mall felt different. There was a sense of cautious optimism in the air, a belief that perhaps things were finally moving in the right direction. Tom left feeling hopeful, knowing there was still much work to be done but confident in the progress they had made. For Dean, the day marked the beginning of a personal transformation. He realized that leadership wasn't about enforcing rules, it was about building relationships and fostering trust. And for Tom, it was a reminder of why he had taken on the challenge of revitalizing the mall, to create a space where people could come together, despite their differences, and find common ground. As the sun set on the quieting mall, both men knew they were at the start of something new, something better. They didn't have all the answers yet, but they had taken the first steps toward creating a space where everyone could belong. The next few weeks at Ridgeway Mall were nothing short of transformative. Tom's quiet but decisive leadership began to ripple through the corridors, affecting everything from operations to community engagement. He spent his mornings walking the mall, observing, listening, and occasionally stepping in to chat with customers or store employees. The viral video of his confrontation with Dean had become a local talking point, but Tom used the attention as an opportunity to introduce himself to the community. He issued a public statement, emphasizing his commitment to inclusivity and promising to turn the mall into a space that everyone could be proud of. Dean, too, was evolving. The humbling experience of being called out so publicly had forced him to confront his rigid ways of thinking. Tom's challenge to create a more welcoming environment wasn't just an order, it felt like a personal mission. He started his days earlier than usual, meeting with staff members over coffee, asking them about their experiences, and taking their concerns to heart. His once feared demeanor softened, and though some employees remained skeptical, others began to notice genuine change. One of the first major initiatives Tom introduced was the Community Corner. This was a previously unused section of the mall near the food court, where Tom envisioned hosting local events, art exhibits, and cultural showcases. The idea was simple: give people a reason to visit the mall beyond shopping. He believed that fostering a sense of connection would not only bring in more visitors but also create a more harmonious atmosphere. The first event was a local art fair, featuring pieces from schools, amateur artists, and professional creators in the area. The announcement drew mixed reactions from the mall's tenants. Some store owners doubted it would make a difference, while others welcomed any effort to bring in foot traffic. Dean, eager to prove his commitment, volunteered to oversee the logistics. He coordinated with the artists, set up tables and displays, and even helped a group of high school students hang their colorful murals. The art fair was a surprising success. Families flocked to the mall, drawn by the promise of seeing their children's work displayed in a public space. Local artists brought their friends and patrons, who lingered to explore the shops and grab food from the court. For the first time in years, the mall buzzed with excitement that wasn't tied to a holiday sale or store opening. The event even attracted a segment on the evening news, further cementing the mall's reputation as a hub for community activities. But the true test of the mall's transformation came during a particularly tense encounter. On a busy Saturday afternoon, a heated argument broke out in the atrium between two customers. One, a man wearing a MAGA hat similar to Tom's, was at odds with a woman who had a "Not My President" button pinned to her jacket. The argument quickly drew a crowd, with onlookers pulling out their phones to record. The tension was palpable, and it seemed only a matter of time before the exchange escalated further. Dean was the first to arrive on the scene. He felt a familiar pang of anxiety as he approached, memories of his encounter with Tom flashing in his mind. But this time, he didn't react out of fear. Instead, he took a deep breath and approached the pair with a calm, open demeanor. "Hey there," he said, raising his hands in a placating gesture. "I can see this is a passionate conversation, but let's step over here and talk it out, away from the crowd. I want to make sure everyone feels heard." The man and the woman hesitated, their anger momentarily diffused by Dean's non-confrontational approach. Reluctantly, they followed him to a quieter corner, where he listened to both sides without judgment. By the time Tom arrived, the situation had de-escalated. Dean was mediating the discussion, encouraging mutual respect while gently steering the conversation toward common ground. Tom watched from a distance, impressed. Dean's transformation was clear, and it was making a tangible difference. When the argument finally ended with a handshake instead of a shouting match, Tom approached Dean, clapping him on the shoulder. "Great work, Dean," he said. "That's exactly the kind of leadership this mall needs." Dean smiled, a mix of pride and relief washing over him. "Thanks, Tom. I've been trying to take your advice to heart." The incident became a turning point, not just for Dean but for the entire mall. Word spread about how the situation had been handled, and the atmosphere began to shift. People started to see Ridgeway Mall as a place where differences could be acknowledged and respected rather than ignored or suppressed. As the weeks turned into months, the changes Tom and Dean implemented began to pay off. Foot traffic increased, store owners reported higher sales, and new tenants began inquiring about leasing opportunities. The community corner hosted everything from book signings to charity drives, each event drawing a diverse crowd. The once faded mall was coming back to life, its halls filled with the sounds of laughter, conversation, and the steady hum of commerce. Tom, ever humble, gave much of the credit to the people around him. He frequently praised Dean's efforts in staff meetings, ensuring that everyone saw how much the manager had grown. For Dean, the acknowledgement was more than just validation, it was a reminder of how far he had come and how much further he could go. The transformation of Ridgeway Mall wasn't just about new policies or events. It was about creating a culture of openness and respect, where people felt seen, heard, and valued. Tom's vision had sparked the change, but it was the collective efforts of everyone involved, employees, tenants, and even the customers, that made it a reality. And though the journey was far from over, one thing was clear: Ridgeway Mall was no longer just a shopping center. It was a symbol of what could be achieved when people chose to come together, even in the face of their differences. As Ridgeway Mall entered a new chapter of growth and reinvention, Tom found himself reflecting on the deeper meaning of community and the role the mall played in people's lives. It wasn't just a place to shop, it was a gathering spot, a shared space where individuals from all walks of life crossed paths. Each week brought new challenges, but also new victories, as the mall became a microcosm of the broader changes happening in society, a push for connection amidst division, understanding in the face of disagreement. One of the biggest challenges arose during the planning of the mall's first annual, Cultural Mosaic Festival. The idea was born out of the success of the community corner, where smaller events had proven that people were eager to celebrate their uniqueness while finding common ground. The festival would feature food stalls, music performances, and art from different cultural and social groups within the community. Tom envisioned it as a way to bring people together on a grand scale, showcasing the richness of diversity while promoting unity. Organizing such a large event was no small feat, and the process quickly revealed cracks that still existed in the mall's fragile ecosystem. Some store owners expressed concerns about the logistics, worried the crowds might disrupt business. A few tenants, resistant to change, quietly voiced their skepticism, labeling the festival as unnecessary or too ambitious. Dean, while supportive of the idea, found himself overwhelmed by the sheer scale of coordination required, from permits to safety measures to ensuring every participant felt included and valued. To complicate matters further, tensions bubbled beneath the surface. A few community members objected to the inclusion of certain groups in the festival, arguing that their values clashed with others. The mall's social media pages were inundated with comments, some supportive, others divisive. Tom knew that handling these conflicts would make or break the festival's success and could define the mall's new identity. Tom approached the challenge the way he always did, by listening. He organized a series of town hall meetings at the mall, inviting tenants, employees, and community members to share their thoughts and concerns. Each session was an exercise in patience, with heated debates often breaking out over seemingly minor details. But Tom remained calm, reminding everyone of the festival's purpose, to celebrate differences, not to let them divide. Dean, too, found himself tested. One particularly tense moment came when a tenant threatened to withdraw from the event, citing discomfort with sharing a booth space with a group they felt was too political. Dean, drawing on the lessons he'd learned, sat down with both parties, facilitating a conversation that emphasized shared goals and mutual respect. It wasn't easy, but by the end, they reached a compromise that satisfied everyone involved. As the festival date approached, the entire mall seemed to pulse with anticipation. Bright banners were hung from the ceilings, colorful posters announced the event in every window, and volunteers worked tirelessly to transform the atrium into a vibrant hub of activity. The day before the festival, Tom walked the mall late into the evening, checking every detail and offering words of encouragement to the tired but excited staff. Dean was there too, coordinating last-minute deliveries and ensuring everything was in place. The morning of the festival dawned bright and clear, and by noon, the mall was alive with energy. Families strolled through the aisles, sampling food from around the world, admiring handcrafted goods, and enjoying performances that ranged from traditional dances to contemporary bands. The community corner became the heart of the festival, where people gathered to share stories, laugh, and connect. One of the day's highlights came when Tom himself joined a panel discussion on leadership and community building. Seated alongside local leaders, activists, and even a few mall employees, he spoke candidly about the journey Ridgeway Mall had taken. He shared the lessons he had learned from his encounter with Dean, emphasizing the importance of empathy and the courage to confront one's own biases. The audience, a mix of regular customers and first-time visitors, hung on his every word. But perhaps the most poignant moment came when Dean took the stage later in the afternoon. Encouraged by Tom, he decided to share his own story, the mistakes he'd made, the growth he'd experienced, and the vision he now shared for the mall's future. His vulnerability struck a chord with the crowd, many of whom approached him afterward to thank him for his honesty and leadership. As the sun began to set and the festival wound down, Tom stood at the edge of the atrium, watching the diverse crowd mingle and laugh. He saw children chasing each other around the fountain, elderly couples holding hands as they browsed the booths, and teenagers snapping selfies with the colorful murals created by local artists. For the first time, the mall felt like more than just a place, it felt like a home for the community. Dean joined him, a tired but satisfied smile on his face. "Looks like we pulled it off," he said, leaning against a pillar. Tom nodded, his gaze still on the crowd. "We did. But more importantly, they did. This festival wasn't just about us, it was about them finding their place here." Dean was quiet for a moment, then said, "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad you walked into this mall that day with that hat." Tom chuckled, clapping Dean on the back. "Me too, Dean. Me too." As the last of the festival goers trickled out and the staff began the slow process of cleanup, Tom reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Ridgeway Mall had been more than just revitalized, it had been reborn. And while challenges would undoubtedly arise in the future, Tom knew they were ready to face them together. The mall was no longer just a collection of stores. It was a testament to the power of community, the strength of resilience, and the beauty of finding unity in diversity. Ridgeway Mall had become a symbol of hope, a place where people could come together, not despite their differences, but because of them. And that, Tom realized, was the most important transformation of all. The weeks following the Cultural Mosaic Festival cemented Ridgeway Mall's reputation as a thriving hub of community and commerce. What once had been a struggling relic of the past now stood as a beacon of renewal, symbolizing how growth and understanding could transform even the most unlikely spaces. Yet, as Tom reflected on the success, he knew that true change required more than one grand event, it demanded consistency, vision, and the ability to adapt to the unforeseen. The festival had brought in a wave of new visitors, some of whom hadn't stepped foot in the mall in years. Foot traffic increased dramatically, and store owners began reporting record sales. New businesses expressed interest in leasing vacant spaces, and the mall's once bleak financial projections were replaced with optimism. Despite the progress, Tom recognized that growth came with challenges. He was determined to build on the momentum while ensuring that the mall's newfound identity as a place of inclusivity and community wasn't compromised. One of Tom's priorities was fostering long-term relationships with the local community. He formed a mall advisory board that included tenants, employees, and representatives from neighborhood organizations. The board's purpose was to ensure that the mall's events and initiatives reflected the needs and desires of the community it served. Dean, who had now become a trusted ally, was given a leadership role on the board, a position that both humbled and motivated him. The board's first major project was the creation of a mentorship program. Tom had noticed that many of the mall's employees were young people balancing work with school or other aspirations. He envisioned the mall not just as a workplace, but as a stepping stone for personal and professional growth. The mentorship program paired seasoned professionals with younger employees, offering guidance in areas like career planning, financial literacy, and leadership development. The program quickly became a hit, with many participants citing it as a turning point in their lives. As the mentorship program gained traction, another opportunity for growth presented itself. A local nonprofit that focused on supporting underprivileged families approached Tom with an idea to convert one of the mall's unused storage spaces into a community resource center. The center would provide everything from free legal advice and job training to after-school programs for children. Tom embraced the proposal wholeheartedly, working with the nonprofit to secure funding and approvals. By the time the center opened, it had become another symbol of the mall's transformation, a physical embodiment of its commitment to serving the community. Amidst these developments, Dean continued his personal journey of growth. The festival had been a breakthrough moment for him, but he knew that true change required ongoing effort. He enrolled in leadership training programs and began attending workshops on diversity and inclusion. His new approach to management was evident in his daily interactions with employees and tenants. Where once he had been viewed as unapproachable, he was now seen as a source of support and inspiration. One memorable instance of Dean's transformation came during a heated dispute between two store owners over promotional space. The disagreement had escalated to the point where both parties were threatening to pull out of the mall entirely. Dean stepped in, mediating the conversation with patience and fairness. He found a solution that satisfied both parties while reinforcing the mall's commitment to collaboration and mutual respect. When the issue was resolved, one of the store owners approached Tom to express their gratitude, saying, "I don't know what you did to change Dean, but it's working." As the months went by, Ridgeway Mall's reputation continued to grow. Local media outlets frequently featured stories about its innovative programs and events, and it wasn't long before the mall caught the attention of national publications. One day, Tom received a call from a reporter who wanted to write a feature on the mall's transformation. The piece, titled "The Mall That Became a Movement," detailed the journey from a struggling shopping center to a thriving community hub. It highlighted the role of leadership, the power of second chances, and the importance of creating spaces where everyone felt welcome. The article brought a surge of attention, but with it came scrutiny. Some critics questioned whether the changes were sustainable or accused the mall of using community engagement as a marketing ploy. Tom welcomed the feedback, using it as an opportunity to double down on the mall's mission. He and the advisory board worked tirelessly to ensure that every initiative was grounded in genuine care and purpose. One of the most significant tests of the mall's resilience came during a sudden economic downturn. Rising inflation and shifting consumer habits threatened to undo much of the progress that had been made. Some stores began to struggle, and foot traffic dipped as families tightened their budgets. Tom knew that the mall couldn't rely solely on events and initiatives to weather the storm, it needed to adapt. To address the challenges, Tom and the board implemented a series of creative solutions. They introduced flexible leasing options for struggling tenants, allowing them to stay afloat during tough times. The mall also partnered with local farmers and artisans to host a weekly market, drawing in customers with fresh produce and handmade goods. Dean, ever the problem solver, worked closely with store owners to develop marketing strategies that emphasized value and community support. Through it all, the spirit of Ridgeway Mall remained unbroken. The challenges served as a reminder of the journey they had undertaken and the strength they had gained along the way. Tom often thought back to the day he had walked into the mall wearing his MAGA hat, unknowingly setting off a chain of events that would change so many lives. It was a moment of conflict, but also of opportunity, a catalyst for transformation that proved the power of listening, learning, and leading with heart. As Ridgeway Mall approached its one-year anniversary under Tom's ownership, plans for a celebration were underway. The event, titled Ridgeway Rising, would honor the journey of the past year while looking ahead to the future. It was more than just a party, it was a testament to what could be achieved when people came together with a shared vision and a willingness to grow. On the night of the celebration, the mall was filled with familiar faces and new ones alike. Tom stood on the stage in the atrium, looking out at the crowd that had become his extended family. Dean stood beside him, a symbol of redemption and the power of change. As Tom took the microphone, he felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the success of the mall, but for the people who had made it possible. "Tonight isn't just about Ridgeway Mall," Tom began, his voice steady and full of emotion. "It's about all of us. It's about what we can accomplish when we choose to listen, to grow, and to believe in something bigger than ourselves. This mall isn't just a building, it's a reflection of this community, of its strength, its resilience, and its heart. Thank you for being a part of this journey. The best is yet to come." The crowd erupted into applause, and as Tom stepped back, he caught Dean's eye. The two men exchanged a nod, a silent acknowledgement of how far they had come. Ridgeway Mall was no longer just a shopping center. It was a movement, a legacy, and a reminder that even the most ordinary places could become extraordinary when filled with purpose and hope.